Could your worst animal nightmare be this? On a perfect morning along a South Australian coast, a spearfishing competition is underway, and champion title holder Rodney Fox is determined to retain his crown.
I saw an 18-pound strong fish on the bottom and started to glide in on it. And all of a sudden, I felt a big bump and a whack. All I remember is this big thing pushing me through the water.
Rodney Fox's nightmare was about to begin. Or could it be this? A terrifying down-under adventure where a group of young tourists take an inviting late-night swim in an outback waterhole, home of the Australian saltwater crocodile. In Australia, surfing is a favorite pastime, and with 80% of the population living near the coast, it's little wonder. But each time a surfer paddles out into the waves, most are aware their adrenaline rush could take a terrifying turn. They're entering the home of the ocean's apex predator. These coastal waters are the feeding ground for the many species of sharks that have been involved in numerous fatal attacks on swimmers. Tigers, bull sharks, and the notorious great white. Great whites are attracted to any activity. The dangling legs and paddling arms of a surfer makes them an easy target. And sitting right in shark territory, beyond the breaking waves, puts surfers on the menu. Unlike seals, the great white's favorite food, humans are slow in the water and an easy catch. A single bite can sever an arm or a leg and a major artery. If this happens, the victim will bleed to death in seconds. Nearly 2/3 of great white attacks in Australia end in death. A high price to pay for the perfect wave. For the many hundreds of scuba divers who venture beneath the waves each day along the coast of Australia, sharks are never far from anyone's mind. Whilst attacks have been very few and far between over the years, most encounters are with the harmless kind. Although for a hunting great white, divers would be an easy target. And on this tragic day, the dive was to have a fatal safety stop on the way up to the surface. All recreational divers are required to hold at 10 feet on the ascent as a precaution against getting the bends, a condition where bubbles form in the bloodstream, causing extreme pain and sometimes even death. This couple would be suspended in a mortal lock below the surface for the regulation 5 minutes. The perfect prey for a great white. The lightning speed of the shark leaves no time for escape, only time for a husband to sacrifice his life for his wife. One of the biggest great white colonies is found here at the Neptune Islands off the South Australian coast. Sharks come here to feed on the resident fur seals, and in turn, these feared and respected predators attract thousands of visitors from around the world. Cage diving is a safe way to see and study shark behavior at close range. But all educational reasons aside, there's the undeniable adrenaline rush of being one-on-one with these magnificent animals in their own domain. Now protected in many countries, the tide of public opinion is turning from fear to admiration for these living survivors of the dinosaur age.
Great whites are probably the most amazing hunters of all of the sharks. They're the ultimate assassin. They are totally aware of what's going on around them, above and below the water. All of their senses are really up there. They're warm-bodied, and because they're warm-bodied, they can maintain their stomach temperature and also their brain temperature higher than the water around them. Great whites are very sophisticated feeders. They know exactly what's going on. They know that that object, black or pink, is not a seal. So in the case of, say for example, somebody spearfishing, the blood in the water, the rattling of a spear gun, fins kicking on the surface of the water, fish vibrating. All of these things act as cues for a shark.
In 1963, a young Rodney Fox was spearfishing's rising star.
At 23 years of age, I was the South Australian spearfishing champion, and it was basically the love of my life.
That December, Rodney prepared to defend his title. The tournament took place 40 miles south of Adelaide, on a reef off Aldinga Beach. Although the beach is flanked by sheer rocks, the shoreline gives way to coral flats, the ideal hunting grounds for hundreds of fish species. The prestigious competition attracted Australia's strongest divers and fastest spearers.
There were 40 divers on that day, had gathered around at Aldinga Reef, and you had to walk down a very big cliff to get there.
Spearfishing was relatively new and enjoying a surge of popularity in the early 60s. Rod Fox was a pioneer in the fledgling sport.
It was all new in Australia at that time. I was one of the first people to, in Adelaide, to get a mask and snorkel and fins.
As part of his final preparation, Rodney tied a float to his weight belt, securing the rope so well, unaware of the potentially fatal nightmare he was making. It wasn't easy being the defending champion, but Rodney was a brilliant freediver with an uncanny knack for spotting a good catch. Conditions were ideal and visibility good. There was an air of excitement as the competitors set out. Everyone was up for the challenge. Rodney had a plan he thought would put him in the winner's seat. He dived in, determined to retain his title. By the time he returned to shore, he would be fighting for his life.
So I decided to go well out the back from where anybody had been. I was a very good diver at holding my breath. I could dive to 80, 90 feet and spear a fish in those days. I went out wide, speared 2 fish on the way out.
The dying throes of the fish rings a dinner bell.
Vibration is the sense that a shark can sense furthest from its prey above anything, long before blood, long before vision, and long before electrical and sensory perception either. Chances are the shark was well aware of Rodney long before the attack and knew exactly where he was.
The speared fish are attached to the buoy tied around Rodney's weight belt. As he towed a ball of bloody, dying fish behind him, Rodney becomes the unwitting target.
The fish that I was about to spear was well within shooting distance, which is about 6 to 8 feet from the end of the gun. And I was just squeezing the trigger, and this huge thump crash hit me in my chest, knocking me through the water faster than I can swim. It knocked the mask off my face. And the shark stopped and I fell out of its mouth. I thrust my arm out to try and push it away. My hand went straight into its mouth over its teeth, ripping like crazy. I pushed off from the shark, headed up to the surface and took a big breath of air. As I looked down through the bright red water, a great big head with mouth wide open, these big white triangular teeth coming straight at me. A miracle happened. The shark actually turned and swallowed the fish float, a buoy that I had fish on that I was towing behind me. The shark grabbed hold of the buoy, dived, and dragged me down underwater again. And as I'm going behind the shark's swimming down, I'm spinning, I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper. I thought, I'm gone, there's nothing I can do. And another miracle, the line snapped.
On the verge of drowning, Rodney clambered to the surface for the second time.
Got to the surface, took a couple of breaths of air and yelled out, "Shark, shark, shark!" And a boat was coming over. Only boat in the whole area.
I think that's Rodney.
I remember thinking when I hit the surface there, that yelling out, I don't think I can make it back to shore.
Get in. Rodney.
I looked up at them and I couldn't give them my arms because I thought they would pull them off as they dragged me in, and they had to try and roll me into the boat.
Despite horrific gaping wounds, incredibly, no major arteries were hit.
When they rolled me into the boat, the main artery from the heart to the stomach was left open. One nick on that artery and I would have been just gone for sure. That was actually the first time that I felt pain as real pain. The waves of pain kept slowly coming more and more and more and more.
Let's go, mate.
The rush was on to get Rodney to shore.
I must have lost huge amounts of blood because it was bright red.
With organs exposed and a river of blood flowing onto the deck, it became a desperate battle against time. In an era predating cell phones, they couldn't call for help until the alarm was raised back on the beach. The boat couldn't make it all the way to shore. It was too shallow, the rocks too treacherous. The other competitors fashioned a makeshift stretcher and waded out to meet the boat. Rodney had gone into severe shock. They had to hold his mangled body together while they lifted him out of the vessel. Huge chunks of missing flesh, exposed organs and arteries, and some bones were so crushed, parts of his body were like jelly. There was a fine balance between keeping Rodney steady and the urgency to get him to shore as fast as possible. The nightmare was a long way from over, just as the desperate struggle to save Rodney's life seemed impossible, and that it would be too much for his battered body to handle another miracle.
Let's go. Rodney.
There was one car only on the beach down below. They bunched me up so I wouldn't fall apart, put me in the back of the station wagon.
It's more than 40 miles to the nearest hospital in Adelaide, a critical hour, but the miracles were still coming to Rodney's aid. An off-duty policeman happened to be at Aldinga Beach that day. He knew of a house above the cliff that had a phone he could use. With an ambulance on the way from Adelaide Hospital, it was faster to meet the rescuers halfway.
15 to 20 guys helped it over the rocks.
It was a slow and jarring road out of the beach. Rodney's abdomen and spleen were fully exposed, as well as the main artery from his heart. Each bump threatened to spill internal organs and more blood into the car. His friend wrapped him in a tarpaulin to help hold him together.
Guess I help hold you all in, buddy.
I remember it being a very rough ride.
Every jolt racked Rodney's body with searing pain.
Every time it moved, it would crunch all my broken ribs. Every rib in my chest was broken in my left side.
It had been 40 minutes since the great white attacked Rodney. With such grave injuries, he was hanging on against all odds. And now, every minute is critical.
The ambulance is here, mate. You're going to be okay.
Rodney again had to endure another transfer. The ambulance had met them halfway to the city. His rescuers, who had delivered him heroically this far across the ocean, rocks and road, refused to leave his side. Rodney started to lapse in and out of consciousness. Words of encouragement reached out to him as he slipped into the gray world between life and death.
They said to me, "Keep fighting, Rodney, keep fighting."
Keep fighting, Rodney. Keep fighting. Hang in there, mate.
This speaking to me as I'm semi-conscious, I remember as being a vivid thing in my keeping me alive.
Rodney had lost a critical amount of blood, particularly at the scene of the attack. But it was the large patch of red that had first caught the attention of his friends who rescued him. But time was running out. He'd been continually hemorrhaging throughout the hour-long journey to the hospital. Despite the odds, the exposed artery from his heart had remained intact. One puncture would have been all it took for him to bleed to death on the way. Finally, he was delivered into the hands of surgeons who attempted to save his life.
They took me into the operating theatre. They cut my wetsuit off.
Rodney's veins were close to collapsing from the massive blood loss he'd suffered. He needed another miracle.
They cut totally everything off of me.
When the wetsuit was peeled from his body, everyone was shocked when confronted with the true extent of the damage for the very first time. The wetsuit is credited as saving his life by literally holding his body together.
And I sort of disappeared for a while, maybe unconscious.
A medical team of doctors and nurses faced the challenging task of piecing all Rodney's mangled organs together again. With the wounds cleaned, Rodney was heading to the operating table at last.
It had a huge big lights and everything around there.
Rodney's gut and digestive organs were exposed. his spleen uncovered. The shark's teeth had punctured his diaphragm, piercing his scapula and ripped into a lung. The tendons of his fingers and thumb were slashed when Rodney plunged his right hand into the great white's jaws. To this day, a shark's tooth is still embedded in his wrist. And yet, despite surviving the horrific catalog of injuries, Rodney would need his very last ounce of strength to endure what happened next.
I woke up during the operation, and as I lay there, my box of light above me, it was almost like laying in a coffin with a lid on. And I realise now it was the hospital lights above, but my life went dimmer and dimmer and dimmer.
As if the day's events hadn't been horrific enough, Rodney was now awake in the middle of surgery. A fact he never told publicly until now. The marathon operation was finally over. 462 stitches were needed to sew Rodney back together. The shark has forever left its jaw impression in the flesh of Rodney's back and hand. His miraculous tale of survival made instant world headlines.
So many people left the diving world because of my shark attack, and I felt a little bit responsible, and I wanted to show that we could actually protect ourselves in the water. I was more keen to go back in the water with an explosive head, first of all, to protect myself and to know that I could look after myself when I'm in the water and blow its head off is going to do the same job. We power-headed sharks on film to show that humans can protect themselves in the water and you don't have to be worried so much about them.
The first thing you have to think about when Rodney was attacked, it was a different time. In the 60s, killing animals like that, spearfishing large sharks and spearfishing other large animals was a real macho thing, and having a go at some great whites like Rodney did, it's quite understandable. It's natural human behaviour.
But as he spent more time with these animals, Rodney's initial thirst for vengeance eventually gave way to something else.
I realise these days that the shark was only doing what it naturally does. It eats things out there. And that we have to learn to live with the sharks and get in the water in their world and live with them and not just kill them. Sharks were really put on the same level as hell and death and the devil. They were the monsters out there. They were the bad things. And I started to realise that they weren't as bad as people portrayed them. I organised the first underwater cage. I had it built. I thought, well, how do you protect yourself from other predators like lions and tigers? Oh, you put them in a cage. And then I thought, well, if I get in a cage and hang it over the side of the boat and we attract the sharks in, I'll be safe and I can actually see and look at my aggressor.
Rodney began the first cage dive expeditions to film and study great whites in South Australia. Over the decades, he and his son Andrew have interacted with more of these sharks than anyone else in the world. Today, trophy hunters and commercial fisheries have condemned the great white to the threatened species list. Rodney has committed his life to saving the very creature that almost took his.
You don't have to fear the sea, you don't have to fear the sharks.
Rodney lived through one of most people's worst animal nightmares, that of being eaten alive. His ordeal has seen him go through an incredible journey of change, from revenge to understanding to savior.
I think my greatest contribution from the shark attack has been to try and work and get people to understand the sharks better.
Could your worst animal nightmare be this? A group of young tourists take an inviting late-night dip in an Australian outback waterhole. A waterhole that by day looks every bit the perfect place to swim, and by night, a cool retreat from the unrelenting heat of the day. This is the ultimate down-under adventure, until suddenly, a waiting crocodile targets its victim. This waterhole belies the horror of 9 tourists' worst animal nightmare. In the far north of Australia, Kakadu National Park is an ecological wonderland. It is also home to the saltwater crocodile. This remote tropical wilderness consists of majestic escarpments, bordered by huge floodplains crossed by massive rivers. Kakadu has two very distinct seasons, the wet and the dry. Between November and April, the wet season drowns the land. But for the rest of the year, there is very little rainfall and rivers dry up, leaving a series of cut-off waterholes called billabongs. This is sandy billabong. Its seemingly peaceful waters and sandy bank hold the tragic story of a night of horror in October 2002, when a group of 9 young tourists unknowingly went for a moonlight swim with crocodiles. Sandy Billabong adjoins a camping area that is only a short distance away and which is also perfect habitat for crocodiles. These prehistoric dinosaurs live comfortably in the rivers and lakes throughout Kakadu. And when the rivers dry up, they can move across land from waterhole to waterhole. They are opportunistic feeders, ambush predators, preying on anything that comes down to the waterhole to drink. Kangaroos, wallabies, birds, and best of all, wild pigs which maraud the country in plague proportions. Humans are also on the menu.
People are probably often under the false belief that because it's a small waterhole that's cut off from the main river system, that there'll be no crocodiles there. That is not the case. The name estuarine crocodile or salty is misleading because they can occur in fresh water. Often that's where people make the mistake.
Compelling scenery with a hint of the wild is a great recipe for young English travelers like Alex Graspy.
I just finished spending some time in Southeast Asia and I flew to Perth.
Perth is a popular meeting place for the tourism sector, known as backpackers. These are typically young adventurers who have left their home countries to explore the world on a budget. Traveling alone, Alex Graspy met fellow Englishman James Rothwell in a Perth bar in 2002. The pair hit it off immediately and decided to continue their backpacking adventure together.
We travelled around Australia for a couple of months before we headed up to Darwin.
Darwin is Australia's northernmost city. It is also the jumping-off point for the tourist hotspot, Kakadu National Park.
I met Alex Graspy. He was someone we met in Perth in Australia, and we travelled around for a while and from down the east coast of Australia, and then we went up to Darwin.
Darwin is a backpacker's mecca.
As soon as we pulled into Darwin, we met this English fella from a backpackers, and he took us for a tour along Mitchell Street, and he just said, well, this is it.
Is this Main Street? This is Mitchell Street, yeah. Mitchell Street.
And we both looked at each other thinking, this is perfect, this is exactly what we need.
James and Alex checked into their accommodation. It's a standard backpacker setup, cheap dormitories, communal amenities. Here, they met another group of English travelers, and over the next few days, continued to make new friends. Friends who would share a terrible nightmare for the rest of their lives.
While we was in Darwin, we were staying at a guest house, and we met Isabel and her sister.
Isabel von Jordan was 23 years old. She and her younger sister were from Germany.
The two German girls had come to Darwin purely on their own.
So where are you guys from?
They had just flown in from Bali, Indonesia, where they'd had a narrow brush with tragedy. A nightclub they were to attend was the target of a terrorist bombing, where 202 people were killed. The girls were looking for a fresh start to an already scarred holiday.
Isabel was such a nice-natured girl, very soft, gentle, very attractive, very intelligent. She spoke 3 or 4 fluent languages.
Hello, Isabel. Hi.
The group bonded quickly and shared the same thirst for fun. 2 Dutch girls were also invited to join the group, and despite the diverse backgrounds, everyone got on well. The Dutch, English, and German borders molded into one happy nationality of adventurers, sharing laughs and games in the pool. Games with an ominous twist, pretending to be a crocodile, surprising the girls, just a game. But a game they would play again over the days to come with tragic results. But for now, A horrible preview of the final moments they would spend together in an outback waterhole with a hungry crocodile and their worst animal nightmare.
What was that?
The group got on so well, they decided to tour together.
All of us had hit it off from the start, and I was planning to go to Kakadu anyway, but we didn't have anything arranged at that time, and we were all for that.
Kakadu National Park sounded like the ideal adventure for the 9 new friends. Spectacular scenery and crocodiles.
One of the attractions of going to Kakadu is to see some of the largest crocodiles in Australia.
Yeah, you guys are going to have a great time. First of all, I just need all
You need to have the guidelines in place to ensure that people are safe. And they're very simple guidelines. You keep away from the water's edge. 5 metres is the recommended distance. You camp at least 50 metres away from any waterhole. And you're observant whenever you go near water.
They met up with their local tour guide, who had 13 years' experience working in the Northern Territory. They were looking forward to trekking through bushland, climbing waterfalls, and camping under the stars. It sounded like the adventure they'd been searching for.
The trip was a 4-day trip, 3 nights, 4 days.
4 days of friendship, 4 days of fun. 9 tourists set out. 4 days later, 8 would return.
There was, I think it was 5 English guys, 2 Dutch girls and 2 German girls. Generally people spoke in English all the time because the English guys didn't speak Dutch or German, so strange that. So everybody was on quite a good level.
No, I'm joking. No. When we get going, we might stop by Billabong, which is a water hole, and we'll splash around and get a bit cool. Hey, how does it sound?
Okay.
You all fired up?
Okay.
Come on, let's go. Okay, here we go.
It was a 4-hour drive before their first planned stop, and the air conditioning would barely make a difference to the 90-degree heat.
So on the first day, we left Darwin, and I don't know if you've ever sat in one of them Land Cruiser Troopies, but they're uncomfortable.
Despite the heat, the tight conditions, and the long road ahead, everyone is in high spirits. The boys had been touring Australia for months, but for the Van Jordan sisters, this is their first glimpse of the landscape beyond Darwin. For the next 4 days, they will spend their daylight hours sightseeing, hiking, climbing, and swimming, and their nights camping at designated grounds that abound through Kakadu.
He just said, right, this is the rough sort of itinerary. It's going to be 3 nights, 4 days. We're going to be doing camping, you're going to be doing a bit of trekking, you're going to be seeing freshwater crocodiles, saltwater crocodiles, you're going to be seeing all sorts of other wildlife, you're going to be going swimming, we're going to be camping under the stars. It just sounded like a good fun trip for a good few days.
You reckon we'll see a croc, mate?
Mate, we should do. We're going to be stopping off at a couple of billabongs around the
But
area.
even if they weren't to see any crocodiles, they still had the developing bonds with one another.
Immediately, our bonds were really strong, even from the first day. Even with a guide, everything just gelled really well.
Australia is renowned for its deadly wildlife, but the tourists are excited rather than fearful. Everyone was looking forward with great expectations.
Everyone was full of energy and they couldn't wait to get to Kakadu.
However, at the mention of crocodiles, someone inevitably had to ask the guide the question, is it safe to swim?
I remember him saying no one can ever be 100% sure that everything's going to be fine, but they take all these measures to make sure that the tourists are safe.
Just be careful of the crocs, okay?
So we can't get like a photo if you collide or something?
But these young tourists are on a one-way journey to tragedy.
What was that?
After a few hours of driving, the tour finally stopped for a break.
And our guide takes us on a walk through a trail. And the guide, very knowledgeable, is pointing out all of the wildlife and the plants. He knew his stuff. It's really hot, about 38 degrees. We found a little water hole which we had a swim.
There were no shower facilities at the campsites where the tour planned to stop, so creeks and water holes would provide a welcome opportunity to bathe.
It looked like we was going to really have like the trip of our lifetime.
The sweltering heat continued into the evening.
How's it going here?
That night, the tour guide stopped at Jim Jim Falls.
Every night we would set up camp. There was about 3 tents, and we'd prepare our own food.
No one minded the hard work. It was all part of the fun of experiencing the outback.
Just an idea. Keep the insect screen.
They were now working together as a team for the first time and enjoying it.
We just sat around socialising, basically, having a talk around the campfire.
They were a long way from Darwin and a long way from home. This was as remote as it gets, the heart of the outback. They stayed the first 2 nights at the Jim Jim Falls campsite.
So on the second night, we haven't had a proper shower. We're hot, we're sticky, we're sweaty, we're itching, and even through the night, it's still ridiculously hot. And the guide took us to a little local river, and we got there through walking through some bushes and some trees.
The campers didn't see any warning signs on the track to the water that night. No one gave much thought to saltwater crocodiles, but any water is ideal cover for these ambush predators. The guide shone a flashlight across the surface, checking for the red pinpoints of reflected light that would confirm the presence of a croc. The backpackers are given the all clear to head into the water for a swim.
The water was very, very shallow, maybe only a foot deep.
If anyone had a thought about crocodiles, the shallow water gave a false security. The cool water was a welcome relief. Tonight, they were safe. Tomorrow night, not so lucky.
So we'd been on this trip for 2 days and we still hadn't seen a crocodile. No one felt that they probably would meet a crocodile.
Everyone bedded down for what was to be their final night as holidaying friends. In just 24 hours, their world would be turned upside down. In an uncanny twist of fate, one of them would have a premonition of the horror ahead.
Guys, you alright?
An eerie forecast of the events still to unfold.
Cheers.
As the bush sounds descended over the Jim Jim campsite, everyone fell into a peaceful sleep. Everyone except one of the Dutch girls. Her sleep was disturbed by a dream. Next morning, the dream was so strong, it became the topic of conversation, but then dismissed. It was the first of 2 strange omens to happen that day.
Hey, I had this worst nightmare last night. I dreamed that we were swimming in the dark and we were attacked by a crocodile. No, Isabel, you were the first one to go.
You've got to be joking. We haven't seen one crocodile yet. And mate, it'll be alright if we did. I think so.
A premonition that would become reality in just 15 hours. Today is one of the busiest days on the itinerary, and they set off soon after breakfast.
On day 3 of the trip, we went down to Jim Jim Falls.
May I say, get over there. Look at that.
For Isabel Von Jordan, this was the escape she'd been looking for, to forget the horror of the Bali bombing they had so luckily escaped. This was the perfect playground, a chance to play up for photos, a chance to record happy memories of an unforgettable moment. But the clock was ticking. By midnight, this dream day would be part of their nightmare. Jim Jim Falls is one of Kakadou's most photographed landmarks. The gushing waterways converge at one narrow point, surging over a cliff to a 600-foot drop below. It's the visual highlight of the trip so far. Unaware of the horror ahead, the backpackers made the most of these spectacular falls. A welcome respite from the heat for a group of fun-seeking tourists.
In the afternoon, we went to a rock, which was a really big, massive, steep rock. It took quite some time to climb to the top. But once we got to the top, we just sat there and relaxed. It was really peaceful. We were all tired and exhausted from the climb, and we were just sitting there admiring the landscape. The landscape just didn't end.
After watching a beautiful sunset, the group packed up for the short journey to their final campsite.
We headed on down to Sandy Billabong, where we was going to set up camp for the night.
It had been one of the most memorable days of the trip, but sadly, events about to take place would overshadow it forever. Sandy Billabong Campground was a regular stopover point for the tour. It was about 7:30 when they set up their final camp. Tomorrow would be their last day. Tomorrow, they would be back in Darwin. A meal around the open fire each night had highlighted different local wildlife meat, and tonight's dinner was to be another strange omen, just like the strange dream.
We're all quite exhausted at this point, and we were really dying for a nice cool shower and a freshen up.
Is there somewhere else we can go for a swim?
As it had happened every night of the tour, the guide suggested a nearby swimming hole. Tonight, it was Sandy Billabong.
We'll have to jump in the troop.
Sandy Billabong was around half a mile from the campsite. The decision was made to head off to the waterhole. So just before 11 p.m., they all boarded their tour bus for the short journey to their nightmare.
That night we had a barbecue. One of the things we had was crocodile. We were tasting different meats.
Their last meal had been crocodile meat. They joked about a crocodile exacting its revenge on James.
I think I've eaten so much it'll probably get me now.
I think it will.
The drive to the waterhole was only a few minutes.
Sandy Billabong was quite an isolated spot. We parked the truck and we walked across the sand to get down to the waterfront.
There are signs right throughout Kakadu National Park warning people of the ever-present resident saltwater crocodiles. Incredibly, the group passed 2 such signs declaring the danger of crocodiles in Sandy Billabong. The group paid no attention. No one took heed of the warnings, but rather put their trust in their guide. They thought he knew the lay of the land.
It was 11 o'clock at night when we got down to the Billabong.
The moon was full, but the Billabong was ominous.
Even though it was a full moon, it was still very dark because a lot of the trees and bushes and shrubs were quite high and grew up and over the water.
The dark conditions would add to the camouflage of the waiting predator. Any crocodiles inhabiting the waterhole would have been immediately aware of the group's presence. They would have sensed any movement through vibrations in the water, but the guide was cautious.
We had a couple of torches because everybody was, I wouldn't say nervous, but everyone's apprehensive because it's late, you can't see anything. All we've got is torches and the moonlight. You shine the torch on the top of the water. Everybody was just having fun because we did it every night, just shining to see if there was any eyes.
Looks safe to me.
And he said, look, see, there's no eyes here, this stretch of water's fine.
Safe to go in?
It was probably like the night before. Glenn was always the first one to get in.
No worries.
He started to take off his shirt and get into the water. A few of us followed by example.
Assured by the guide's willingness to enter the water, most of the others joined in, their boisterous activities sending shockwaves through the Billabong. Any crocodile now knows where they are.
It was quite an eerie scene, and the water was very black and murky.
Their only light source in the water came from the torches on the beach. The backpackers quickly lost all feeling of apprehension about the waterhole and indulged in their usual play. After 15 minutes, the guide got out.
The guide knew another group that were camping nearby and said that he was going to go over to that camp and invite them over to join us on the beach.
As the guide left Sandy Billabong, he had no way of knowing of the nightmare about to unfold.
Crocodiles have a great array of senses on offer. They've got great sight, they can see at night, superb smell, but they also have the ability to detect pressure waves through the water, while crocodiles along their jawline have these little pressure sensors that can determine and sense underwater movements.
We said, okay, we'll have a fire going on the beach as well.
The fire added a sinister, eerie light, but the thoughts of those in the water were only about having fun. Mimicking crocodiles was the theme of the night.
Alex in particular, he was pulling people under, he was pulling the girls under, because you couldn't really see what was going on. He would just disappear from the surface and, you know, like you knew it was coming, but you didn't know where it was coming from, and then someone would get pulled under, so we were making probably a hell of a racket.
Playing crocodiles was on everyone's mind. But everyone was on the mind of a crocodile. Ominously, Isabel was to be the next target for the crocodile game. It would be the last move.
James and the two German girls were swimming around and relaxing. I then semi-submerged and grabbed Isabella by her leg, pulling her under the water, pretending to be a crocodile.
It was now only minutes to the real thing.
It was all innocent fun, and everyone thought it was funny.
The crocodile was already on the move.
It could have actually been resting on the bottom of the billabong and just biding its time.
Some of the swimmers decided to move to the shallow water off the bank, leaving Alex, James, Isabel, and her sister in deeper water, some 30 feet out, and now vulnerable.
No one was pulling each other under at that point because Alex had gone to the side, so that sort of thing had passed and we were just waiting for the other group to come. We were just literally treading water and they were chatting on the side.
4 people were now directly in the firing line. Any one of them could have been the target.
There just seemed to be a surge of water.
The crocodile was on a mission.
What was that?
I got banged.
Isabel's sister was lucky.
Valerie she got banged in the same second that the water was just risen up.
Isabel was not so lucky. The crocodile had made its choice.
And I see Isabella disappear right in front of me.
It just happened within a split second.
Very easy for the crocodile in this scenario. Grab, pull underwater and drown. Very easy to do because they can hold their breath for 2 hours.
This wasn't a game.
It was just literally get out of the water, there's a crocodile.
And she never come back up.
Everybody suddenly realised what's gone on. They're looking at the water's still moving.
Where is she?
There's no way that anyone would be underwater for that long.
The realization slowly sunk in to everyone that Isabel was not coming back.
One of the members of the group shone the torch across the surface of the water. And only then did we see 2 big red eyes just floating on the surface. And there was something about them eyes as if to say, you come in that water and you'll go the same way. And the croc just slowly floated down the billabong. And we never see him again.
Their first sight of a crocodile was their last. They now have to live with their nightmare.
Well, once the croc had gone, I suppose it was about another 5 minutes until the guide returned.
What's going on?
The crocodile's got Isabel.
No, we gotta go.
He wanted to do this rescue dive and he was, told there was nothing he could do, so it was kind of strange because everybody was just stuck on this beach looking into the water.
The attack took just seconds. The ramifications would take years. The nightmare for some would never end. A young, innocent life was lost forever that night in the dark waters of Sandy Billabong.
Everyone went back to the camp and we just congregated around the tent, around the camping area.
The alarm was raised and police tried to put together the tragedy from the disbelieving witnesses. Park rangers swung into action to locate the croc.
I was the chief ranger for Norlangie district, which took in Sandy Billabong.
In the early hours of the morning, the rangers launched their boat to begin the grisly search for Isabel's body. Though the Billabong is over 1.5 miles long, it's quite narrow, just 100 yards wide. No one expected this mission to be easy or pleasant.
We felt there'd be a reasonable chance if we found the crocodile, we'd find the body.
The rangers knew that when crocodiles had a large food item, they would protect it from other crocodiles and never leave it alone for long.
As soon as that girl got hit, the crocodile basically did a 180 and bolted back up the billabong.
The crocodile carried its prey all the way back to its territory at the other end of the waterhole, all the while not letting its prize go for fear of other crocodiles stealing it. As the rangers neared the far end of the billabong, a sweep of their spotlight picked up eye shine.
We got eye shine on the edge of the billabong, and we knew we were looking at a pretty big animal. We got within 7 or 8 foot, and I remember Gary saying, look at that, look at that.
It's got the body.
And there was the girl in its mouth.
The gruesome search had taken several hours.
I thought it was like a little girl. Just looked so small, but of course that reflected the size of the crocodile.
The croc had been carrying the body for over 5 hours on its journey down the watercourse. It was not going to give up its treasure without a fight. The rangers knew that the only way to make the animal release its prey was to harpoon it. The plan worked. Isabel was free.
To me, it was just doing what a crocodile does, and that is it needs prey to eat. And it certainly wasn't Isabel von Jordan's fault.
When the predator was brought to shore, it became very clear that this was no ordinary crocodile. It was missing a front foot. It was extremely emaciated. It had a deformed jaw. The front of its snout was badly mangled, and as this part of the jaw is used for its first grab, its feeding ability would have been seriously affected. This rogue crocodile had reached a size of over 15 feet, despite its debilitating deformities. It knew that humans were an easy target, slow to get away and no risk, and it was starving.
When I looked around and you look at the actual scene, it was so eerie. It was just like the perfect scene from a horror movie.
What was that? What was that?
I think you have to take crocodiles for what they are. If you go in the water, it will kill you.
This is a real tragedy. Here we have a group of young people, all from overseas, thinking that they were doing no wrong, and they made a fatal mistake, and that was to swim in a billabong that was home to the Australian crocodile.
The tour guide pleaded guilty to a charge of making a dangerous omission that caused Isabel von Jordan's death. He was given a 3-year suspended jail sentence. An autopsy found it wasn't the crocodile's bite that killed Isabel. It had drowned her. And in a spine-chilling twist, there were 8 more crocodiles in Sandy Billabong that night. One for each and every one of the swimmers. 9 young tourists met in Australia for the holiday of a lifetime. Now, they all carry the scar of the horror down under that became their worst animal nightmare. But for Isabel von Jordan, a bright, intelligent, beautiful young girl in the prime of life, the nightmare is over.